In this week's episode of In-Ear Insights, we are on site at the Martech conference, Martech East, which is at the Heinz Convention Center. And so we thought we'd talk about some of the things that you can be doing with video. So if you haven't already gotten your copy, go to trustinsights.ai/social2020 paper to get our Social Networks 2020 research paper on what the most popular social networks are going to be in the next year. Spoiler alert, one of them is YouTube. And given how prominent video has become, we need to make sure that we're creating a lot of content that is well suited for video. So there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but what we've got set up here is we've got a camera. This is the DJI Osmo Pocket over there, and then a separate audio recorder. Now, Katie, you've had a ton of background in film and movie production and stuff like that. What should the average marketer who doesn't have a production company and $10 million be doing to use video effectively?
Well, if a marketer really wants to focus on video, they should look at the phone that they have in their hand, because chances are it's going to be good enough to get started with. So you can debate, Apple versus Android all day long, but at the end of the day, does your phone have a video recorder? If the answer is yes, start there. You don't have to buy a lot of expensive equipment to get started. And keep in mind, it's to get started. Now, you may decide as your vlog or whatever you want to call it, your videos, your daily videos start to gain in popularity. You can monetize it. You can upgrade your equipment. But the thing that you can't buy is authority. So if you don't have good content going in, it doesn't matter what quality your video is. So I would say focus less on the video quality, focus more on the quality of the content.
For those folks who do want the bare bones of equipment, how much do they need to be looking at in terms of pieces of equipment? Obviously, you have the camera. Mm-hmm. Probably want some kind of microphone.
Right. Well, and I don't think you need to spend a lot of money. I mean, the good news is that a lot of this equipment is available to everybody these days. So, there was a period of time where, someone who wasn't, in the film industry or TV couldn't just buy a lavalier mic or couldn't just buy, some sort of an omnidirectional mic. You had to be a professional something. And so then when professional podcasting really started to take off, this equipment really became more available. And now, anybody can be a podcaster, with a $20 mic and a camera. They don't even need the camera because a lot of the stuff's free. So I would say, invest in a decent microphone, a lavalier mic, or, some sort of a podcasting mic that can plug into your phone to start or can plug into your laptop, and so you have the least amount of equipment, the least amount of wires and, places where the hookups can go wrong, and just start there. Again, it's all about just getting started. I think people focus so much on having the perfect setup that they forget to actually do the thing.
Yeah. I would say probably in addition to that, probably want to hit up your local thrift store and get a lamp. Because if you're not going to do video, you want some kind of lighting. We have the lovely overhead hideous lighting that is common to conference centers everywhere.
Right.
But for your home studio, I know that people sell these crazy ring lights and stuff like you can just get a used lamp, put a light bulb in it.
It's true. Well, yeah, I think that people are sort of going after that appearance of being behind this Instagram filters. Instagram filters have ruined people's ability to just look like themselves on camera. Spoiler, Chris and I are not using a filter. This is really what we look like, so I'm sorry.
Should be able to tell that there's much gray hair.
I was able to so I don't have good overhead light in my office where I do the majority of my recording, but I was able to get a really inexpensive light that I just clipped to my monitor, and I can adjust the brightness because I also sit in front of, a window, so any given time of the day, I might be completely washed out. So just have, a sheet or a curtain or something ready to put over your windows and then use the light that you've bought, because natural light is great, but not for recording video.
Yeah. The part that I think people also, and I know this is true for podcasting especially, people think you have to have top of the line gear to do it. And I can't count the number of really good independent films that literally did everything with thrift store stuff and random parts from Home Depot.
Well, and that goes back to the original point of the equipment is important, but not as important as having good content. So to your point, an independent film that's really good content, the equipment can be crappy. People can overlook the quality or even, the editing or the continuity if the story is really compelling and engaging.
Now, for editing software, again, if you have a budget of $0, there are two packages that I particularly like. One's called Shotcut, which is a nonlinear editor, and then there is another called OpenCut, I think. I'm drawing a blank, but if you Google for open source video editor, these two projects are open source. They run on Windows, Linux, or Mac, and they offer like 85% of like Adobe Premiere's features for 0% of Adobe's price. So again, if you're just getting started out and you just need to put video clips together, it's a really good way to go.
Well, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the laptops today come with some sort of an editing software built in with the assumption that you're going to be doing that with your computer. So I think there was like iMovie and those types of things built into the Macs. I don't know exactly what's built into a PC, but I would imagine something.
Yeah, I think it's Windows Movie Maker. I don't know if they discontinued that. I haven't used a PC in years, but the open source product will do just fine.
Right, and one of the pro tips, if you're just getting started, if you're recording and you need to edit, the best way to mark your time is to make some sort of a noise. So a lot of times when I'm recording a different podcast, we'll sort of like snap right into the microphone to mark the time. And what that does is you can actually see the spike in the file. So you say, okay, that's a point where I need to pay attention and make a cut. And so it's just a really easy way to sort of mark what's happening instead of having to go back through and say, where were those places where I started and stopped?
Yep. Yeah. I will always do 3. So like at the beginning of this episode, I'll clap 3 times so that when you're looking in the editor, if you're trying to line 2 tracks up, you can the 3 ridges give you and make them offset. So 1, 2, pause for a second, 3, and that way you can line them up. Audacity is probably the best $0 editor for audio for a lot of this stuff because $0, and it's pretty capable, all things considered. It has its quirks, as every open source product does, but it's certainly better than blowing $50 a month on Adobe Creative Suite, unless you intend to be doing video production and audio production professionally for money, where you have money coming in to offset it.
Right. Now, one of the things that we're doing differently today is we're recording this podcast. First of all, we're recording it off-site. So we're, live at Martech today, but we're also recording the video because what we wanted to do was get the most out of the time that we had. And so we're actually going to have a couple of different kinds of content as a result of this. And so we'll have the video that we can put on YouTube. And, as Chris mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, YouTube is going to be really important in 2020. So we wanted to make sure that we started recording video of us recording the podcast, which sounds a little bit meta, but it just means that our content will be available in multiple different places for people to access it. So we'll have the audio file, we'll have the video file, we'll have stills if we need them. And then what we'll be able to do is then take the audio file, have it transcribed. We use otter.ai, and then we'll have that content for blogs, for social posts, for a variety of different things. And really all we did was set up a phone and a recording device for about 30 minutes.
Yep.
And we get all of that.
And if you want to monetize even that, if you sign up for Amazon Associates, which is Amazon's affiliate program, you can then recommend the exact equipment that you bought, assuming you didn't buy it at the yard sale, and then let other people access. So if you go, for example, to trustinsights.ai/Amazon storefront, all of the equipment and cameras that we're using, the cables and stuff that I carry around that weigh like 50 pounds, you can buy just the entire list. And if you wanted to get set up and running quickly, and you had, I think the list tops at around $700 total for everything, that would be sort of a drop in, the Amazon truck pulls up and flings your podcast studio out onto the front porch. But it's good enough to get started.
Now, Chris, you've been recording podcasts for well over a decade. Marketing Over Coffee with John Wall. So this is a very small setup. How has that changed in the decade? Because I know when you guys started, it probably looked a bit different.
No.
Really?
No, actually. This kind of gear, like these consumer devices, these are not by any means new or improved, really. What's changed is the ecosystem for the distribution of the podcast. So back in the old days when you had to walk uphill both ways with your microphone in the snow.
Carrying John on your back.
Exactly. You had to hand edit the RSS file. So you had an RSS file on your server that you had to hand edit every time you posted up a new episode. So you had to you had to create the audio, FTP it somewhere, hand edit the RSS, hope you didn't screw it up, and then when you used when you had the new episode available, then you had to manually ping the different services to let people know that it was available. And there was no mainstream podcasting software. So Apple's iTunes didn't support podcasting, I want to say 2006 is when it first introduced, it was 05 or 06. But it took a long time for any major player to start taking audio podcasts. And now, of course, you have Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. Our friend and colleague Tom Webster said Spotify has embraced podcasts wholeheartedly because every minute you spend listening to a podcast is a minute of they're not spending royalties on, they have to pay to musicians. So that you've seen this huge uptake in podcasting. But this process, these pieces, not super different. It's all on the distribution side and the monetization side. Now podcasts are big money. I mean, there's big money in the podcasting space. I think a little too bubble-licious for me in spots, but as a shameless plug, if you'd like to sponsor the Trust Insights podcast, please email sales@trustinsights.ai.
But I think, that's one of the things that I think people can think about is what is the content of my podcast? Who is my audience? Who would be a good sponsor? So that's a really, I wouldn't say it's an easy way to monetize, but it's a good way because getting a sponsor isn't necessarily an easy thing. Do you feel, I know that you and Tom Webster have talked about this, do you feel like the podcast bubble, much like the influencer bubble, is about to burst, or is it still just taking off?
It's still just taking off because it's very crowded. It's much harder to build an audience now, but the fundamental economics are still in podcasters' favor. As long as services like Spotify are saying, hey, if we don't have to pay you directly, and we can avoid paying licensing fees for music, we're going to keep promoting you because it is in our economic interest to do so. Same with Google Podcasts, same with Apple. Everybody is seeing essentially free labor out of podcasters and saying, we want more of this. So as long as that model holds and podcasters can monetize on the other side with sponsors and monetizing their audience, it's a model that works for everyone. Just like YouTube. YouTube channels and popular YouTubers. I mean, there's stuff on YouTube that I don't understand why people watch, but lots of people watch it a lot. And as long as they can monetize their audience, and this is one show called Hot Ones, which is where Sean Evans interviews famous people, and now he's got The Rock and Beyonce and all these people. And the premise is they eat progressively hotter hot wings as they do the interview. It's gotten so popular now; each episode's getting 6 or 7 million views that they're monetizing it not from an audience perspective only, but now they're selling their own brand hot sauces too. So it's okay, they're finding different ways to monetize it. I mean, that alone could probably be its own episode of the show. But even starting out, if you sign up for an Amazon Associates account, you can, and you should, because you are legally required to say, this episode is sponsored by the DJ Osmo Pocket Camera. Buy yours on Amazon today and get the link out. And I remember seeing something on some saying Instagram, some starting Instagram folks were showing fake endorsements to look bigger than they are. Don't do that. Just sign up for an affiliate program, and you then legally have to disclose that you get paid if someone buys the thing.
We could go down a whole rabbit hole of common mistakes that people do when they're starting out. So one of the things that you were looking at over the weekend, since we're talking about video and YouTube, is Instagram TV. Now, I know that you were basically what you were trying to understand was, does using the feature of IGTV do anything for your brand, for your engagement? What's sort of the bottom line?
The bottom line is it's mostly a bust.
It's mostly a bust.
It's mostly a bust. And here's the thing. This was, in your realm, the failure of planning on two fronts, right? Instagram failed to plan that. Nobody wants yet another app from Facebook on their phone, and you have to have that installed to continue watching the full videos. And for a lot of the influencers and brands, it never really made it on their radar, so it was never part of a coherent content plan. It was just sort of is always an afterthought, because for a while, you had to have its own separate format. You couldn't just reuse the YouTube file the video file that you're going to use for YouTube. And they've kind of fixed that, but it's still not delivering outsized results. There was a period of time from March to August of 2019 when the algorithm favored IGTV, and that honeymoon is over. That those things have now fallen to the same performance as everything else. But fundamentally, going back to your point, you need to have a content plan and strategy in place before worrying about the channels, and then make stuff that can be as cross-channel as possible, so that you can, if you want to, cross-load it to IGTV and then watch nobody watch it.
Right. Well, and I think that that's an important point. So, as we're talking about people just getting started out, using inexpensive equipment, you can't skip having a plan. And so I think one of the mistakes that I see people make a lot is they'll just turn on the camera, start recording, and hope for magic.
Yep.
And there's very few people in the world that actually works for. And I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, I know that someone like, Gary Vaynerchuk records himself all the time, but you'd better believe he has a plan. Like, he's not just randomly doing things. It might come across that way, but that's actually something that is part of his brand, that's part of the plan, and everything has a purpose. Like, he didn't make all of his money doing things randomly.
Right.
And so I think that that's one of the things that people tend to overlook is you have to have a plan. Now, we talked about recording live today, and so we brought the equipment, and we always have a plan going into the podcast. We have a topic. Now, that's a really simple plan. It's maybe a 30-second discussion, but it's a plan. We're on the same page. We're working towards the same goal. So a plan doesn't have to be the thing that hinders you from getting started. Just go in having some sort of an idea of what you want to get out of it. Do I want it to be about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes? I was talking with somebody last week who has this idea for a podcast, which, okay, great. What's the idea? And so, the person told me, and I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. How long is it going to be? She's like, well, we talked for about, 90 minutes the first time. So I need to figure out how to cut it back down to 30 minutes. I'm like, that's going to be nearly impossible because you're going to have a lot of choppy. So you need to think through, does it work? Can I test it as a longer format thing? Because, people's attention spans, they're pretty short. I mean, mine's already pretty short. My mind's already 600 different places. Am I still doing this?
It's lunchtime.
Right, exactly. What's happening? But it's something that you also need to consider is, do I have enough engaging content? Or if I have too much to say, how can I break that up so that people are still engaged? So you can't skip planning. Yes, you can just start recording, but I guarantee you will get junk. You
need to have that, and you need to pull some data, right? So we pay attention to the American Automobile Association, disclosure, they're a client of the company, because they publish reports every year. Here's how long the average commute is, right? When do people listen to podcasts? At work, at home, cooking, in the gym, and on their commute. Right, so if you're not surveying your audience, your email, it's like, hey, when you go to the gym, if you go to the gym, how long do you spend there? And do you listen to podcasts there? And if they do, then you can calibrate your show based on your audience's needs. So many people are like, yeah, we're going to do a 2-hour podcast. Like, nobody's going to listen to that.
Nobody's going to listen to that.
I wouldn't listen to that. I wouldn't even listen to myself talk for 2 hours. The other thing is you can't skip over the audience research.
Right.
Asking people, what do you need to hear about? What would be helpful to you? Because if it's just a long-winded rant about yourself, you and perhaps a parent will be interested in that. Maybe.
My mom would like that. She'd be like, oh, finally you tell me something about your life. No guilt at all there.
Yeah, but it helps nobody else.
Right. And I think the other thing, so you have to do your audience research, but you also have to do your competitive research. Does this thing already exist? Probably. So what is your way of differentiating? And then also from a legality standpoint, does the name that you want already exist? Does somebody already own the rights to it? That's actually something that...
you had that happen to you recently.
I had it happen to me. And it wasn't a big deal. It was for a different podcast that I do with Carrie O'Shea Gorgone. And it was just a slight variation. Now, the people who said that they had the claim to the name first, they had zero content. They weren't doing anything with the name, and it actually wasn't trademarked. It was just something that they thought was a cool idea. That said, we were happy to adjust just to avoid any sort of issues because we were early enough on. We did our due diligence, and Carrie also happens to have a legal background, so she knew what to do. But it's something that had we not, it could have turned ugly. People will sue you. They're very happy to try to take money from you, even if it costs them money to do so. So make sure that you're sort of checking all the boxes. Does this name exist? Am I using copyrighted photos? Am I using copyrighted music as my intro? Those are all things that you can't do unless you have permission.
Yep. So it's all planning.
Yeah.
Final tip, make sure anytime you're recording, especially if you're recording in an environment that's unfamiliar, give yourself 5 seconds on either end of the recording. Your noise reduction software will thank you.
Yes.
As always, please subscribe to this podcast. Go to trustinsights.ai/podcast to find the actual feed itself, or just stop by the website. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, to the newsletter. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.